Apple should be prohibited from allowing peer-to-peer encryption between Apple devices. Recently there's been a large amount of terrorist attacks, and there are always national security threats. And the most recent attack was in Paris, where 130 people were killed and 367 people were injured. And many terrorists communicate their plans over encrypted apps that no one can gain access to. Two popular apps that are used are Apple's FaceTime and iMessage, which are only on Apple's devices. And I'm affirming the resolution that Apple should be prohibited from implementing end-to-end encryption on their devices and services. The risks simply outweigh the benefits. End-to-end encryption is basically where the recipient of a message can decrypt it, and they're the only ones that can decrypt it, and the company's servers are used to move the message along, but not to decipher the message. It was adopted with iOS 8 and is still used today with iOS 9 on the newer devices. The use of end-to-end encryption causes criminal cases to hit a roadblock or go cold, as that's what the Manhattan DA, as they would put it. In the past year alone, there were 111 times when police could not search iPhones even though they had proper search warrants, because they could not gain access to the messages on the phone, because they could not get the phone unlocked. The cases range from murder, child rape, sex trafficking, and robbery, so all terrible cases. Justice was not served as a result of Apple's strict encryption policies. So if they had more loose encryption policies, the police could have gained access and closed the cases and arrested the people that were responsible for the crimes. During the speech at a New York Federal Reserve Bank, Manhattan DA Cyrus Vance stated that every time a tip leads to a phone, it may go cold. There are benefits to more police power and surveillance. Here's an example in the report. There were 8 recent cases where the evidence on the unlocked iPhone provided crucial evidence in the investigation that moved the investigation along instead of being a roadblock. 2 specific examples. There was a shooting of a video that led to a murder conviction, and in another case, the internet search history on someone's phone and text messages led to the cops obtaining 2 rapists that are now facing life in prison. So justice was served in both of those cases. These cases would have died out if the officers did not have access to the phones. So the loose encryption on the phones let them catch the people responsible for the crimes. End-to-end encryption is also an impairment to the safety of U.S. citizens and people around the globe. It makes it harder to catch terrorists, pedophiles, rapists, and murderers. In a statement in September of 2014, the director of the FBI stated that the notion that someone would market a closet that could never be opened, even if it involves a case involving a child kidnapper and a court order, to me does not make any sense. So he's saying that he doesn't understand why they would market something that allows criminals to get by with crimes. Some people may argue that encryption only plays a role in a small amount of cases, but it happens more often than you would suspect. And if someone you loved was the victim of a crime, and the only evidence to progress the case forward was on an encrypted iPhone, you would feel different about the end-to-end encryption. Also, the safety of citizens is being curbed in the name of increased privacy. You have to ask where the line is drawn between safety of a person and the amount of privacy that the person requires. You can't have both unlimited privacy and end-to-end encryption and at the same time expect law enforcement to detain every single terrorist and criminal. You can't have the best of both worlds. I say that the line is drawn when the well-being of another person is at risk, and the only way to protect the victim or catch the person responsible for the crime is to have access to the encrypted cell phone that was used. I would rather give up a small amount of my privacy and help increase the protection of myself and other citizens. Apple should be prohibited from allowing end-to-end encryption on its devices and services. And the encryption causes legitimate criminal cases to hit a dead end. The encryption is a harm to citizens, and it is curbing the safety of citizens in the name of increased privacy. It does have its benefits, such as preventing hackers from gaining people's personal information, but the negatives, such as preventing criminals from being arrested because evidence needed is located on an encrypted iPhone, simply outweighs the positive.
You mentioned that police investigations are dead. Do you know if police have any other form of obtaining said information?
Do you mean from iMessage or FaceTime
Yeah,
specifically?
yes.
No, with iMessage, once someone receives the message and they delete the message, there's no way for the police to obtain the sent messages because Apple does not store them on their servers.
Are you familiar with a remote administrative tool?
No, I'm not.
Would you like to be familiar with one?
Yes.
It basically allows police officers full access of a computer and user that, but this is my time to question. Okay. Do you know if the VoIP software is impenetrable?
The software that Apple uses,
Yes.
I don't think anyone can gain access to the iMessage through Apple servers. There have been no reported incidents where someone has been able to penetrate the servers and gain access to the messages.
Are you for certain?
Pretty sure. There's been a case where they gained access to iCloud photos, but the iCloud photos is not the same as, they don't use the same servers as iMessage. So
Okay.
it's on the same software.
Did you not mention that photos and videos have led to criminal arrests?
Photos and videos over, no, when they had access to the phone, when they actually were able to get inside the phone, when they unlocked it, they've led to the arrest.
Okay, so you would consider that an alternative form rather than obtaining iMessages sent?
Yeah, it's not the same as iMessage. Yeah, they gained access to the phone, they unlocked it, and they went to the photos and Apple.
Okay. Do you know if the FBI can still legally access information stored on cloud? Or is Apple closing that off to law enforcement like they are iMessage, even though they can't really access it?
I'm not aware of whether Apple allows the FBI access to the iCloud, like the
Okay.
photos and documents, but I've not heard of any cases where they haven't been able to access them either.
I understand. Now, you know that it is a business's primary goal to have consumers and maintain consumers, right?
Yeah.
Make a profit off of them, of course. Do you think that Apple has a stake in their stance of not budging and allowing law enforcement, even if they could? Do you think they really have a legitimate argument in not allowing law enforcement to obtain their information?
Well, Apple's argument is that by not allowing themselves to gain access to the messages, it prevents anyone from being able to gain access, such as hackers. But they can still have security that keeps the common person secure from hackers. They don't have to be so strict with their policies and the way their software works. They can be more like Google, so they could actually gain access or work like the normal text messaging app, where you could go with a warrant. You could go to the AT&T or Verizon, and they could gain access to the messages that you sent over the texting app, not over iMessage, but over the actual cellular data.
Okay. Alrighty. So, are you proposing some sort of backdoor?
Yeah, a backdoor, but not where just any old person could gain access to the backdoor, but one have a backdoor but make it extremely hard to access.
Okay. But I mean, you understand that that if police had access to a back door, someone who knows their way around computers, I'm sure that they would have the capabilities to access that back door. It's not completely sealed off to the public.
Yeah, it's not going to be 100% secure, but they could get it to where it would keep 99% of the criminals out. I mean, it's not going to be super easy to gain access to.
In some argument over Apple's iMessage, to clarify, Apple is a VoIP program that acts as a texting service, similar to IM. Facebook can be compared to it. Whether or not those are encrypted, it's not aware to me. It might be. I don't believe they are. Okay. It's over the internet rather than a cellular service. This is where the encryption this is where the argument unfolds, but this is where the encryption takes place, of course. And it doesn't use cellular service like AT&T. And the real argument is just that. It doesn't use cell service for for the police to access. They can't go up to AT&T and say, hey, hit me up with these messages. They can't do that. It's over the internet. So this is introduced the tension between the tech industry and crime fighters in the United States. And I'm talking exclusively to about the United States, but I don't think that this topic really shifts anywhere else. So anyway, each Apple device has a private key and a public key, and this is where encryption unfolds. After I mentioned the internet, but each Apple device has a private and public key. When the two devices communicate, they use each other's private or public keys, and these public keys are stored over the Apple iCloud, I believe, the Apple Cloud, and these public keys are used to establish a connection. So when someone sends your device a message, your device is accessing that public key, and it sends it in a form that only your receiver's device knows. And I've said this before, this is where the encryption unfolds. It just keeps unfolding. So when your device receives a message, it accesses its own public key or private key, and your phone is the only device that knows how to unencrypt that data, if that makes sense. But it uses that public or private key, and private keys are actually stored locally, which also is where the issue is. Police officers would like, I suppose, the convenience of being able to basically have the message laid right there in front of them. But this is where much of the debate begins. iMessage encryption capability is often considered a consumer protection, and this is why Apple has really become popular for people interested in, I suppose, generally computers, or because it has this encryption, and that just added protection, I suppose. That is what draws some of Apple's their consumers, other than looks and user interface. But I believe that Apple's encryption is one of those added bonuses. Android has their computer flexibility, but I think Apple's is really their encryption. But of course, what I think doesn't matter. But iMessage, it sort of helps protect against, third-party malcontents. It helps law-abiding citizens. It keeps them from being monitored. And I believe that that's one of the added benefits to it, and I think that's why they've become pretty popular since 2011. And it could actually be considered a security provision for the economy. You think of a businessman sharing confidential information with a potential buyer, or that if something, there's going to be some confidential information probably passed between each other, and this encryption, encryption is a staple to security, and that is where I believe Apple is going with this. And Apple's even stated, their goal is privacy and protection for the consumer, which honestly makes sense as a business. That should be Apple's priority, which they've come out and said it is. iMessage, it's interesting because Apple cannot actually read the data that is sent between the phones, and that's more unfolding. That's where a lot of the debate begins, because police officers will attempt to talk to Apple and say, hey, can we have this information for this crime, which Curtis called a dead case, and Apple's unable to provide because these private keys are stored locally, and Apple can't just go in there raiding their house with Apple law enforcement, but the police can, which I've stated. But Apple and Google have actually, back onto protection, Apple and Google have actually signed a letter to the Obama administration urging it to support encryption, stating that it is a cornerstone of the modern information economy's security, which undeniably it is. There's a lot of the economy is based on information.
You talked about software that the police could use to obtain messages and monitor messages that are sent. Do you know if that actually works on iPhones, or if that just works on computers?
Well, the iPhone is essentially a computer, and it does have network access. It acts through it acts through the internet, so it is possible, yes.
But the iPhones use a mobile operating system compared to a Windows.
Yeah, but they're sending out the same data.
Okay, so that goes through the internet and not through the actual device. Do you monitor from the device itself or through the?
No, you monitor through the internet.
Okay. You also mentioned that Apple, their devices are so appealing because of their privacy and their encryption. Is that really valid? Because look at other manufacturers. The average person doesn't really understand the so-called benefits of iMessage. They just.
Well, I did state that it was a partial attention grabber. I mean, people who are aware. I mean, you have experience with computers, of course. People that are aware, they would understand the importance of encryption. They might look into that. I understand the common user isn't, but those that would pay attention to this debate, understand encryption, its role. I think that I believe that that's one of the that's one of the reasons why they go for it. But I mean, there is also design. There is also hardware architecture, all that good stuff. But I wouldn't say it's a primary reason someone goes out and buys a Mac.
Okay.
Or an iPhone in this case.
Is it possible for Apple, would you accept, do you think it's possible for Apple to loosen on encryption and still offer the same, almost as much security, similar like how Google does? Like they're not as strict, but they're still pretty secure.
Generally there is a bit of wiggle room in there. It would be difficult in the way, because of the way Apple does their encryption. All of the, the information the police are looking for is stored locally, and even if Apple wanted, really they can't offer. I mean, I'm sure they could allow law enforcement to have access to the cloud for photos and videos, which I believe they.
Apple can still offer privacy and protection for the average consumer while not being so strict with the way their iMessage and FaceTime works. They can set it up similar to the way normal text messages work over Verizon or AT&T, where the police could gain a search warrant and take it to, the Verizon or AT&T, and they would gain access to the messages. The average person doesn't even understand the benefits of iMessage. Most of them don't even understand the difference between iMessage and normal text messaging apps. They buy iPhones because of the design, the physical design, and because of the hardware, not necessarily because of the privacy benefits of iMessage. You said that it prevents law-abiding citizens from being monitored. Yes, it does, but a lot of the stuff over iMessage, it's not like you're not sending your bank account information over iMessage. It's normally just personal conversations. So yeah, it does prevent everyone from being monitored, but it also prevents, terrorists or rapists or murderers from being monitored and their activities. So it's more harm than good. Most people would meet in person to discuss major things like that, and not necessarily do it over text messages, because a lot of intelligent criminals understand there are ways for the cops to gain access to the phones and what they send over them.
Alrighty, in your rebuttal you mentioned that Apple could allow you to send messages over the cell service rather than the internet, but I'm not allowed to feel, that if you put it over cell service, it kind of limits those that might have restrictions on their cell service, such as data restrictions. A message being sent out, they're not very, very small, but of course it adds up depending on the average texter, but it would honestly, it would be more user friendly if it were over the internet. And you also mentioned that the average consumer wouldn't understand encryption, but I don't believe that encryption. I believe that doesn't justify not allowing encryption. Encryption, it's all about protection, and I think that if you take advantage of the consumer based on how much they know, it seems morally wrong. And you said they mostly go for the design, which of course they do, with the sleek design. But I believe that the encryption still adds to drawing consumers towards them rather than their competitors. You also mentioned that personal conversations, more personal conversations occur over iMessage than business conversations, and well, you really can't measure that. So, honestly, that I wouldn't really consider that a valid argument, because you have to think that businesses would take advantage of that encryption if they knew about it, of course. But and that is really all I had to say.
You mentioned that there were data restrictions or text messaging restrictions with modern day phone plans, but iPhones are not the same as flip phones. The plans you get with an iPhone, they generally offer unlimited talk and text with a decent amount of data to use. So I don't really think that's an issue. I'm not against encryption. I think encryption is a good thing that benefits people, but I think that law enforcement should be able to gain access to the messages with a proper warrant so they can catch the criminals, and so the cases don't go cold and people that are responsible do not, get let off the hook. You said you can't really measure, there are more personal conversations than business conversations over iMessage, but generally a business conversation would be had over email or in person. There might be some information sent over iMessage, but you're limited on how much you can even text in one message, so you're not going to be sending a large amount of crucial information over iMessage.